Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Troy Talks. This is episode number 2. If you missed episode 1, I highly suggest you go back and watch that. Little preview of that's going to be playing right there. We talked a little bit about Russell Wilson and the successes he might have with the Denver Broncos, but in this episode, I'm going to be talking a lot about the Denver Broncos free agency and how it might have been the craziest one yet. Of course, the biggest free agency acquisition for the Denver Broncos was Russell Wilson. Like I'd mentioned earlier, you can watch episode 1 that talks a lot about why he helps the Denver Broncos, why leaving Seattle was a great choice for him. All of that will be covered there. But in this episode, we'll be talking a lot about the free agency acquisitions besides Russell Wilson and why the Denver Broncos really could be a Super Bowl threat this season. The next biggest add in free agency was defensive lineman DJ Jones. Broncos added him on a 3-year deal. Incredibly good run stopper and helps the defensive line, especially since in the Russell Wilson trade, the Broncos traded away Shelby Harris. Adding DJ Jones was a must. He had the second most tackles for loss in 2021, had 14, only second to Aaron Donald, who had 17. So that shows you just how good of a run stopper he might be. Another addition to this Denver Broncos team is Randy Gregory from the Dallas Cowboys. On the defensive line, once again, very important edge rusher. Since the Broncos did lose Von Miller last season, they desperately were looking for a counterpart with Bradley Chubb, and they definitely found it in Randy Gregory. Obviously, there was some previous suspicions and suspensions for Randy Gregory, but that was for weed in the past, and now the NFL no longer tests for it and actively suspends players for weed. So Randy Gregory's kind of past is in the past, and he looks to heavily improve on his most in recent years in which he's had some good productivity, but now really gets a full chance with the Denver Broncos. Another important ad for the Denver Broncos, K'Waun Williams coming in from the San Francisco 49ers. He comes in on a 2-year deal. Broncos desperately needed a cornerback, especially after they lost Bryce Callahan and Kyle Fuller to free agency, two of their best in the cornerbacks room over the free agency, but they do have Pat Surtain and Ronald Darby there still, but they did really need a slot corner, and K'Waun Williams still on the market was a great ad for them. PFF ranked him at 8th overall, best in slot, so he is an incredible ad in a desperately needed spot for the Denver Broncos. Another addition on the defense would be Alex Singleton from the Philadelphia Eagles. He comes in as a good special teams linebacker, not much more, not much less, but a position that needed filling for the Denver Broncos after they lost Micah Kiser to free agency as well, and of course Von Miller. So they desperately needed another linebacker, and they play a 3-4 scheme, so linebackers are very, very important. And Singleton will be a great fill, has some good special teams options, and should be a good 1-year option here for the Denver Broncos. And the Broncos haven't added much on the offensive side besides obviously the huge gain of Russell Wilson, but they did add a couple options, Tom Compton being one of them, a very good fill right tackle that the Broncos desperately needed considering they lost Juwan James. And Tom Compton coming in at an 86.5 PFF grade last year is an incredible grade for an offensive lineman, had over 500 snaps as well, so had a pretty good count and should really help that offensive line and help Russell Wilson feel protected a little bit more. And last but not least, to end this recap, Josh Johnson, a backup quarterback for the Denver Broncos, had a couple of pretty good games last year under Lamar Jackson when he went down for the Ravens and has a decent bit of rush side, but has a worry about interceptions. But obviously, as a backup quarterback, the Broncos aren't really worried too much. As long as Russell Wilson stays healthy, they have their number one quarterback. And the Broncos still have $15 million left in cap space, so they still have plenty of options to look for on the market. A lot of the free agency players that they lost are still there. Bryce Callahan, Kyle Fuller, Kareem Jackson, a lot of these older guys that they let go still are on the free agency market, and they still have a chance to bring them back if they really want to. And with $15 million in cap space this year, they still have plenty of money to do with it. So let me know who you think the Broncos will add towards the end of this free agency as we get closer to the newest season. And this has been Troy with Troy Talks. Thanks for watching.